Well, that is the nail in the coffin. SEC football is dead. This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. TJ Pittenger joins to talk about how SEC football cannot continue to be carried by ESPN, and this postseason, 2 years without a champion, proves the conference is not what it once was. Also, Kirby Smart got to the podium after they lost to Notre Dame and disrespected the Big 12. How does that make any sense? And Deion Sanders leaving for the NFL. There's a new update. The Raiders have turned him down. If you hit subscribe, I get to keep my job. Without further ado, SEC football is no more.
The SEC, Drake. Is the conference dying? What's the ESPN freakout meter right now, 1 to 10? Well, let's talk a little bit about this.
The SEC is dead. That's it. I mean, you could turn on SEC shorts, which is hilarious. By the way, I grew up an Arkansas fan, like born and raised in Valonia, Arkansas. Love the Hogs, love the SEC. I've been there. I've been to the games. I've screamed. When A&M first came to the conference, I went to that game that they played at Arlington, and it was Ryan Tannehill versus, I think, Tyler Wilson. And I remember chanting SEC as Arkansas beat A&M. And now, what used to be like a fun, the SEC is good and we win a lot. Now it's gone. Like the luster of that conference being #1 in college football is gone. And the second that everybody could pay players, and the second that we started evening out college football through NIL and revenue sharing and these new big ideas and realignment expansion brought Texas and Oklahoma that turned out to not be that good of additions to that conference, the SEC went away. And maybe the biggest piece of that, too, and here's why the ESPN freakout meter should be very high. 2 straight years without an SEC team in the college football playoff national championship. They won't win it again, now consecutively for the first time since like 2005-ish. And why ESPN is freaking out is because they just dropped a load of money on the SEC. This was going to be their product. Oh, we got it from CBS. Now, we've got the best conference in college football, and we'll bring Paul Feinbaum and Kirk Herbstreit. We're going to make sure that Nick Saban's on that set and Pat McAfee. We talk about the SEC and the South and how that's the best place you could possibly watch college football, the best conference for college football. And then what happened? In the same way that ESPN killed off the NBA. We don't watch the NBA anymore. In the same way that ESPN killed off the MLB. I'm not turning on the MLB on Sunday nights. In the same way that ESPN has not promoted hockey despite a massive contract to bring the NHL in. We're seeing record lows in viewership for these sports the second that ESPN gets its hands on them. And the SEC is going through the same thing right now. ESPN's once again looking around the room going, well, none of our programs are working right now. No one's watching First Take. I didn't even know PTI was still a thing. And our major product, the one thing we can hang our hats on, the SEC, is underperforming. Joel Klatt said it with Fox. He said the narrative of the SEC is king is dead. And that is exactly spot on. What was once this power conference and proved it with a CBS contract is now flailing.
Yeah, the idea that past performance means anything right now is also pretty hilarious, right? The first comment that we'll get on this video will absolutely be about, we've won X number of this. You think we haven't won anything, right?
You think we'll get comments on this video?
1 or 2. I think that the narrative, though, we won X number in 20 years. We did this. Sure, that's great. And no one denied 5 years ago where the SEC standing was. No one denied that the SEC had the elite premier programs, especially when teams that are in the championship now, like Notre Dame and Ohio State, weren't living up to expectations, especially when teams like Michigan last year weren't living up to expectations. But now you've had a couple straight years of this. Alabama gets in the most controversial play. The SEC really shouldn't even have had a team in last year. And then this year, they completely underwhelmed. All 3 of their teams losing by double digits when they took their exits. And you've got a balancing out, and maybe not even a balancing out. Like, is the Big Ten the best conference now? Is it even a question?
It's not a question at all. I mean, 2 of their teams won the national championship. Notre Dame is an effective Big Ten team, and they have been for the last 10 years. We've considered them that in auxiliary sports, ACC for sure, but they've always aligned with that Big Ten brand in football. So it feels like 2 Big Ten squads are going to meet in the national championship in Atlanta. And I'll go back, like SEC Shorts is posting about how, the SEC needs, it could be dead dead, and they've missed the college football playoff championship for 2 years in a row. And then Greg Sankey comes out and says, well, we love being the underdog. We've always embraced being the underdog. No, Greg, you've never been you've never acted like the underdog. Why are you saying this now? And you turn on Feinbaum and everybody. There are so many fires to be put out right now because the SEC is underwhelming. And in a down year for the Big Ten, okay, in a down year, remember that first year of the college football playoff, 2014? That wasn't a massive year for the Big Ten Conference. They were like, oh shoot, going into the playoff era, we barely sneak in Ohio State. Many thought that like Baylor or TCU should have gotten that spot instead. And then the Buckeyes go win the championship. Nobody freaked out. Everything's good because conferences ebb and flow, up years, down years. Nobody's britches are bigger than somebody else's except for the SEC. And when you start to spew that narrative of, well, we deserve 4 automatic bids every year. When the SEC starts saying that preseason and then puts this product together, when a Big 12 team wins the SEC in the regular season, goes further than any other SEC school in the college football playoff, that's when you know things probably aren't as healthy as they wanted you to think they were 5 months ago, spewing all this propaganda, or even a month ago, skewing propaganda going into the college football playoff. You lost Notre Dame. You should have lost 3 key calls that were, come to review, bad. Lost Arizona State a game against Texas. I mean, you didn't perform in the college football playoff. Alabama loses its bowl game to Michigan. South Carolina loses to Illinois. And the SEC wants to tout itself as a conference that needed 4 in this year. At this point, I know it sounds very subjective. I'm the Big 12 guy. But truly, the SEC is not what it was 5 years ago. It's not what it was in 2011. At this point, red button, college football is evening itself out, whether SEC fans like it or not.
Yeah, there certainly does seem to be a playing field leveling. You mentioned the playoff itself, right? They went 2-3 in the playoff, and no disrespect to Clemson or Arizona State, their 2 wins were probably the 2 of the most underwhelming wins by a favorite, a double-digit favorite in both games. Yep. They needed double overtime in one of them, and they needed a goal line stand in the other one to keep Clemson from coming back. And that's no shot at Clemson and Arizona State, 2 teams that got in because of auto bids, 2 teams that were voted outside of the top 12, if I could get the words out. Yep. And so their 2 wins maybe have a little bit of an asterisk by them anyway. They're 2 kind of, if you don't win either one of those, we're sitting around firing even bigger panic buttons. But when they got matched up with even teams, you remember the first round? Remember the narrative? We might get 3 blowouts, but at least the Tennessee-Ohio State game will be good. We know that Georgia's got down a quarterback, but we still like them as a slight favorite against Notre Dame. And they got embarrassed in every game. Ohio State, if they wouldn't have stopped shooting themselves in the foot with penalties and drops, they'd have blown Texas out when they played in Texas. Yep. And so, yeah, I don't even, what do they have left to hang their hat on? The most draft picks, having the most guys go to the league next month and in the next couple months? I
forgot that Tennessee made the college football playoff until you just said that. And the reason I forgot is because they got beaten into absolute submission against Ohio State. The same Ohio State that SEC fans want to tell you has underwhelmed. It's always crazy how the narratives start. As, yeah, well, Notre Dame, I remember when they lost to Alabama that one year, and Ohio State, they always find a way, Ryan Day, to choke there at the very end. And then the SEC team loses to that same team that they were undervaluing the week prior. And you'll never hear foot in mouth or eat crow. It's always woe is me. I'm the underdog now, and everybody's going to love me because we embrace that mentality. So what do you have to hang your hat on? You have Nick Saban on College Game Day giving the stat about draft picks. You have, 4 LSU quarterbacks are currently X, Y, and Z, top 10 in passing touchdowns in the NFL. And yeah, cool, I guess. I mean, we could talk the Heisman Trophy winner from the Big 12, the Blentnikoff winner from the Big 12. I mean, you start talking about the national championship from the Big 10, and you go to the ACC, and there is still solid competition at the top end of the ACC, whereas SEC schools are getting blown out or losing bowl games against teams that they once said were these pitiful members of college football. And it's just their narrative is no longer stacking up. What do they have there to hang their hat on? 3 letters that they think are worth a lot, and they're just not. The product is not there right now.
The rest of college football seems to have caught up somewhat, maybe even passed in certain regards. And, it's not to say the SEC will never win a championship again or anything like that. Like, there certainly will be ebbs and flows within this sport. But just this stranglehold that they've had on championships in college football seems to have been relinquished. And I don't know if we won't, because unless a new Nick Saban arises, I don't know that we'll ever see what we saw from a very impressive, dominant standpoint. There's no denying that. Nobody in here is saying, oh man, it wasn't impressive what they did for a 15-year run. But I just don't know that we'll ever see that again.
I don't think so. And for SEC fans, you're right. This doesn't. 07 Florida was great, right? Or 2011 LSU Alabama, or 2009 Bama. We can go through 2019 LSU. Those are great. Those are also 5, 10, 15 years ago, but that's not today. Maybe you were the best for a long time. I'll give it to you. I'll wave the white flag there. But today, you're not anymore. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is where I go to get tickets. College football playoff national championship is here, and Game Time has the cheapest tickets to get your butt to Atlanta for the title between Ohio State and Notre Dame. The past playoff games have been awesome this week, especially, and this one is sure to be a tight, close, good ball game. Filter out the fluff with Game Time picks. I use Game Time to find tickets for upcoming games, browsing through deals, and it's a breeze. The Super Deal, in particular, stands out as the best value for any event. I can see seat views before I buy, and the on-time ticket delivery and lowest price guarantee give me complete peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDON College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, and that is guaranteed.
Drake, it wasn't enough just to absolutely get dominated by Notre Dame. Kirby Smart took to the podium after the game and fired some shots towards the Big 12, fired some shots at the Big 12 and the rest of college football maybe in general. What are your thoughts? And let's talk about what Kirby's complaints are.
TJ, you and I have talked about it. The SEC is in a state of disbelief right now with where college football is sitting. And it's not just Paul Feinbaum. It's not just ESPN. It's also the coaches like Lane Kiffin who come to the podium, or the former coaches like Nick Saban who come to the microphone and say, well, the SEC is the best for this reason or that reason. And Kirby Smart, postgame, after losing the Sugar Bowl to Notre Dame, was asked if there was a disadvantage to having a bye in the playoffs and where the 1 to 4 seeds were. And by the way, currently all 1 to 4 seeds are out. None of them made it to the final 4 of the college football playoff, or only one of them, I should say. And 2 of those teams, he says, all 4 were out. He says 2 of those teams in that top 4 were better than the other teams, to be honest with you. But I'm not here to complain about anything. And it's my favorite trope from SEC coaches. Hey, I'm not here to complain. I just want to get out in front of everybody else. I'm not complaining. And then they complain. Or they do a really good job of complaining and then saying, but I'm not complaining. That's exactly what you're doing. You're fighting for what? You're saying that 2 of those 4 teams were in a different ball game, a different league than the others, and that's not true. Arizona State went to double overtime with Texas, and 2, the targeting and then a touchdown that was possibly dropped. 2 calls don't go their way. That completely. One of them was the last play of the game where Texas scores to tie it up on 4th and 13, and the kid might not have caught the ball, and it should have been reviewed, and it wasn't. And that's one example where Texas could have very well lost. So what are you telling me that there's a gap between 2 of the teams compared to another 2? And then Boise State, watching Ashton Genty, competitive as all get out against the Penn State squad that took a possible national championship team down to the wire. Boise State proved it deserved to be there. What did Georgia do? They got their doors blown off by Notre Dame, the same Notre Dame team that pregame it was, Alabama killed Notre Dame. They're always fraudulent. We'll find a way to beat them. Their strength of schedule is 44th in the country. Georgia's strength of schedule is 1. How do you come to the podium, complain about the Big 12, complain about the Group of 5, say that there were 2 teams that were in a different league, and think that that's okay after you just lost to Notre Dame, after you just got stomped, but if you couldn't move the ball, your big physical offensive line, your run game, nothing. I don't understand who gave these guys, the SEC, a free pass to just say that they're better even when they lose. That is stunning. The lack of self-awareness from that conference, commissioner down, is stunning.
Yeah, the idea of winning hypothetical games, no stranger to the SEC. It is strange, though, after you lose a on-the-field game to then bring up more hypotheticals and say, but if this, we would be maybe in a different spot. They had every advantage. They won the SEC. They were the 2 seed. They got the bye. They didn't have to have the wear and tear. They got more time for their backup quarterback, who actually didn't play very bad. Like, it wasn't his fault they lost. They actually got more time for him to prepare. And like you just said, it starts from the top down. Who was the most responsible for setting up the playoff format the way that it is? It was the Big Ten and the SEC commissioners. It's the ones who control all of the power here in our sport. And then what's the first thing they do when it doesn't benefit them to the absolute T? They start complaining about the format. And
whoa, TJ, they're not complaining. I just want to be very clear here. These aren't complaints, right? I just want to be very clear. They're just voicing their opinions.
And we mentioned this in another segment, but this idea of we relish being the underdog. How do you relish being the underdog and then complain about these other teams weren't as good as us when you lose by double digits? It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Right, we're the underdog. We really want to tout the fact we're the underdog. Also, nobody else is as good. Nobody else is as good, and I get it. TJ, there are legit gripes about the college football playoff format and how it's set up. I believe, and what do we just see? The schools that didn't get buys are in the national championship. They're in the Final Four. They're the ones that are continuing through the college football playoff. I would have loved for an Arizona State to get a crack at, had they been the 12 seed, had they been an 11 seed, a 9 seed, an 8 seed, cool. Well, I'm fine with we start reseeding and trying to figure out, okay, on paper, who are the better team. That's great. Boise State, because I do believe Boise State shouldn't have been above Arizona State based on resumes. Ashton Genty's running against Nevada. All that to be said, that's a legitimate gripe about the format is, hey, how do we make sure it's set up fairly? And ultimately, the Big 12 even can get more opportunities, like a 10-2 BYU that killed Colorado. They should have gotten a shot, beating SMU straight up to compete or be in the conversation of the college football playoff, and they weren't. Those are gripes that I think are legitimate. But to come to the podium and be like, two of those teams were in a different league than the other two. You just lost to Notre Dame. And maybe you can make a case that a warm-up game helped you. You look at the NFL wild card and then bye weeks, and maybe there I could give you some solace. But to just complain about complaining, but just to lose and be like, you know what? We're the underdog. The SEC's the underdog, but also we are way better than Arizona State. We are way better than Boise State. That just doesn't, especially when all four of those top four have now lost, it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
This is the first year since 2000 that the SEC didn't have a team with 0 losses, 1 loss, or 2 losses. Obviously, their top teams all with 3 losses or more for the first time again since 2000, when the SEC's top team, Florida, went 10-3. It's like everybody. It's that meme where everybody in the party knows something, but the guy in the corner says something out really loud, and everybody else just keeps kind of partying. Yep. It's like everybody else can see it, except for the people that it's happening to. The SEC somehow, maybe blinders on, maybe just foolish pride. I don't know what the answer is, but everyone else can see it. Those in the room have no clue.
No, and with Fox, man, they do a pretty good job. I want to give them credit on their side of Big Noon will go to Colorado, and then they'll go to Michigan State, and then Big Noon will go to Kansas State. And you're like, you know what? Good for you guys. Not just picking the school with the most money every weekend, but let's go to the Big 12. Obviously, they're going to camp out a lot in the Big 10, and let's avoid the SEC. They've got plenty of exposure from other outlets, and if you turn on ESPN, it's just SEC propaganda, because again, they have doled out so much money for a product that is not delivering the way they wanted it to. The second they got this season, no more CBS, Vern Lundquist, these legendary games. That's all moved to ESPN and Joe Tessitore at 3:30, and no one really cared the way that we thought they would. And ESPN, again, they signed a big contract with the NBA, and then no one really cares at all, actually, when NBA games come on. That has historically low viewership. So as much as that propaganda machine, ESPN wants to continue to tout Kirby Smart and Paul Feinbaum and Nick Saban, that's great. I'll watch Locked On. I'll watch College Football Addiction. I'll watch Fox, where they're talking about every other school out there. And like you said, the SEC standing in the corner, they all know I'm the best. And the guys that are dancing are going, who's that guy in the corner? As we're all having our own fun time with college football, they just want to complain. And then kind of like spin their gripe. Like, oh, no, we're complaining because we're the underdog, but also we're complaining because we're the best. that can't happen. I wish that they had some sort of logic.
Yeah, I will say they do a good job from top down doing this, right? It doesn't matter if you're
to the commissioner. The
from the commissioner down to the guy that is apparently DMing Sidney Thomas on the side. They all, maybe if you weren't doing that, you could beat Florida on the road and not peed on your leg. But yeah, from the top down, they all get the company memo. They all get the company line. And so if there's one thing you got to give my hat off for, it is the congruity. It is the way that they all tout that company line.
Yeah, they do. They for sure do. And it's funny. It's like an SNL skit at this point. They want attention, and they're all so good at being right down the middle. And I feel bad for like a Sam Pittman who's just drinking a cold beer in the corner. He's just like, I don't want anything. I don't want to do with any of it. I just don't want to get fired, please. And even a Shane Beamer. You listen to Beamer. He's got some pretty good press conferences. He's a guy that seems to play it level-headed, who grew up with a big ACC, Virginia Tech background. And so he plays it pretty even keel. There are some coaches who do it right in the SEC, but guess what? Those guys don't get a lot of attention. We don't talk about Sam Pittman we don't talk about Shane Beamer as much as we probably should for being good people or good coaches. We talk about Kiffin and Kirby Smart and Nick Saban and the guys that are going to carry that machine until they leave their respective schools, and always talk about how I love the clip of Kiffin saying it's just different here, and the scores start popping up from all the bowl games this year. Sure, it's different. It just means more losses. Today's show is brought to you by Wayfair. After the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC, and I find that decluttering, refreshing my space helps me get back into a routine. As a first-time home buyer, very soon moving in, I'm tidying up, clearing out, all within my budget. Wayfair has everything I need. I'm getting new furniture. My favorite part, the free and hassle-free delivery, even for larger items. Wayfair's site has it easy to navigate. I find everything I need in no time. Big couch? They've got it. Something new to style the home? They've got it. Tackle the New Year's home goals? They've got it. I love like a ranch style, like a Chip and Joanna. I lived in Wake for 5 years, so I just go free delivery, hassle-free delivery, Wayfair. That's it. Give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That is WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair. Every style, every home. That is guaranteed with Wayfair.
Coach Prime to the NFL. It seems to pop up every week. We seem to do a video on it every single week. We've got rumors, reports that there is heavy interest in his side with the Las Vegas Raiders. I almost said Oakland, then I said LA, and I butchered it 3 times. So now let's go with the Las Vegas
St. Louis Raiders.
Yeah, whatever team, whatever city they're in this year. Let's talk about that. Would he leave to go there if that's where the Suns were?
So the Raiders have actually come out since this report and said, we have no interest in Deion Sanders, it kind of blows my mind. He is an effective football coach. He is an NFL legend, and he's somebody that I do think could help turn a franchise around if given the opportunity. It's so odd to me they would immediately say, just at least interview the guy. Somebody should interview the guy. And Deion has talked about staying at Colorado and the opportunities there and leading young men and changing lives. And I told you 2 weeks ago, Deion is going to stay at Colorado. If an opportunity in the NFL opens up, he has voiced it would have to be perfect. And the only way it would be perfect is if he has some sort of clause or stipulation in his contract that the team he goes to drafts his son. And if I'm the Raiders, if I'm the Tennessee Titans, I don't want to blindly say without a combine, without a pro day, yes, fine, we'll take Shedeur Sanders as our franchise quarterback. Is he going to be an elite NFL quarterback? I do believe there's a very good case, but Deion has the brand to be able to set his number, to set his expectations, to set his contract. And the Raiders don't want any part of that, it sounds like. Did the Titans? I know he responded to their GM being fired. Would Deion fit in the NFL? Those are all very big questions, but he has long said that he has no interest in the NFL unless he gets to coach his sons. And I found it interesting, too. Chad Ochocinco said with Shannon Sharp, this is per thespun.com, that NFL, he said on Nightcap, don't go to Las Vegas unless there are major changes. It sounds good, Johnson said. It sounds real good, but I understand Prime knows best. Prime's been around the game of football for a very long time. You also know that if you do have interest in that head coaching job, you'll have a very short leash unless you have a quarterback. I don't think overall it'd be a great move for Deion because we've seen former players try to do it at the NFL level and get yanked in year one. That's not something that I want to risk when you've already turned around the entire economy in Boulder, Colorado.
There's also some news out this week about just Coach Prime looking forward to the challenge, the difference of not necessarily being a dad anymore, though I do think he is very much a father figure to a lot of his players. Not necessarily being a dad anymore, but just being able to be a coach. I wonder how much, now, maybe not enough to really want this, because who wouldn't want a Shedeur or Travis on their team, but just being able to be a coach and not having to be a dad too, like how much do you think he's looking forward to that opportunity?
Really cool. He says, the quote was, "I've been praying about this day. Now I could just be a coach and not be a dad." That's antithetical to a lot of what he said, but in a cool way, right? He's talked about if the opportunity was perfect, he would go coach his sons in the NFL. But that opportunity right now isn't perfect. And the fact that he's excited to be able to go coach at this level without Shedeur being there, without Shiloh being there, is really cool for Colorado fans. And really cool for college football. The quote continued per Sports Illustrated. "It's an honor and a privilege to be standing before you," he said to the team. "I can't explain how happy, how thoughtful, how thankful I am for this day. Has been praying, anticipating the day. You've got to understand," he says, "it's an emotional day without those two knuckleheads. The first day coaching without his boys. A pleasure and an honor. You can be a coach, not a dad." I like that. I love that. That was the quote from Deion Sanders. Really neat that while we've all talked about this emergency scenario where he does bolt to the NFL because he gets that opportunity, that's very unlikely. And if we've learned anything, TJ, the guy that I once questioned, wondering, okay, can he back his word up? Can he actually win games? Can he really lead a program strong? Now he's stood up to everything he said. He's qualified every line that he's given that football program. Every line he's given the media, been very open, very honest. When he says something like that, it sounds very genuine. I don't believe he's blowing hot air up everybody's skirt. I think Deion Sanders is there to stay, again, unless there's that 4-5% emergency chance that the Titans call and say, fine, we'll take you, Shedeur, and Shiloh. And even then, he might have to really sit down and think about that, because that kind of commitment, that kind of risk is tough.
He's built something in Colorado, and that's what sticks out to me the most about what you're saying about what's happened here with Coach Prime and the Buffs. And they're on such an upward trajectory. We talked about it when we talked about the Alamo Bowl in a previous segment, but he's built something to where they are one of the brands in the Big 12. And when you're at a spot where you're potentially at the top of a conference, any conference, a major conference in America, you have some certain built-in advantages, whether they be recruiting, whether they be publicity, whether they be just people following your program, the money that's flowing into Boulder. There are some real serious advantages. And I don't want to minimize what Coach Prime would do, but I don't think anybody's bigger than the NFL, right? The NFL, the monster that it is right now, it's almost starting over, right? And can he rebuild the Titans? Can he rebuild the Raiders into something? I'm certainly not going to doubt him, but I do think that that's a little bit of the factor too. He has the machine up and rolling in Boulder and on an upward trajectory. I don't care that Travis and Shedeur are leaving. It's an upward trajectory, and they're going to be picked to win a lot of games next year too, and they're going to be picked to compete for that Big 12 crown. And competing for that Big 12 crown means that you are in the talks for the playoff yet again.
Yeah, Gerard Mayo to Antonio Pierce. In the last 2 weeks, we've seen examples of guys who trusted their old organizations, who trusted the fact that their status as an alumni in the NFL could help carry them as a head coach or give them a leash. They didn't have that. They got fired after 1 year apiece. And for Deion, if it's the Cowboys, that you're right, that risk is too much. You've already built in Boulder, and you could go coach the Cowboys for 2 seasons, be run out of town, and forever your status in that city will be marred. You're no longer Deion, Prime, the guy who came in and brought swagger to that organization. You're the failed coach, the popular alumni Ring of Honor guy who came in and was a dud as a head coach. Stupid decision by the organization. And from now on, you just don't get that same moniker. Or you are legitimately the savior of Colorado football. 2 winning seasons in the last 16. Which do you want? Which risk do you want? You've already made yourself you're already a household name in football, and you've got a great thing going at Colorado. Don't mess it up. And I think Deion knows that. Chad Ochocinco does. Chad Johnson wants him to know, hey, Deion, just stay. And maybe he had interest in the Raiders job because Vegas is great. Maybe they'd take his sons, but as long as there's no interest on the way back, Deion, he has an ego in a good way. Like that dude's, he's very open. Like he's prime. That guy's got a nickname and wears sunglasses at the podium. He's got ego in a good way. And if the Raiders aren't going to match his expectations, he's Deion Sanders. He doesn't need them.
Do you have a bold take? Do you have an expectation for Colorado 2025?
Strictly dependent. I do think Deion's still there next year. If he's not, I'm very worried about the future of that program. Who steps up? Is it one of those assistants? Is it another former NFL legend? If Deion's in town, though, they're looking at another 9-win season. I do believe that based on how good it wasn't just two guys that made up their roster this year. They had plenty of help defensively, especially if they are down the stretch in the second halves of games. I'm going to go with a 9-win season as the 8-9 win floor for Colorado with Deion next year.
And if they excel over that just a bit, we're, again, probably talking about them in the playoffs. So, Drake, where can people follow you for more Big 12 content?
Yeah, at LO Big 12 or at Drake Cetol on Twitter and wherever you find your podcast with Locked On Big 12.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah.